Hello everyone and welcome to today's Insta Live on the special occasion of Women's Day, Money Talks. On behalf of myself and the entire Psych for You team, we wish everyone a happy Women's Day. I'm Niharika Bhargav, the founder and CEO of Psych for You, with 19 plus years of work experience in HR, organizational development, and expertise in psychometric assessments. I help individuals and organizations unlock their true potential. Today, we have a very special guest who is on a mission to break the stereotype that finance is not for women. Meet Meeta Gupta, the founder and CEO of Moola for Women, who brings over 30 years of global banking expertise in investment strategy, risk management, and wealth management. Since launching her platform in 2020, she's empowered over 4,000 women globally to take charge of their financial futures. Meeta, welcome to the live session. We are so excited to have you here. Before we dive in, would you like to share what inspired you to start Moola and how the journey has been since inception?
Thank you so much, Niharika, for giving me this opportunity to talk to all of your lovely audience. And thank you, lovely audience, for being here. And a very, very happy International Day to all, International Women's Day to all of you. And yes, your first question, Niharika, is what inspired me to begin Moola, right? It's a little bit of both my personal journey as well as what I wanted to do for the world at large. So I always wanted to give back to the society. And I knew that the only thing I knew was finance. So for the longest time, I thought that I wanted to give back to society, to women in particular, but I wasn't sure how. And then there was a personal event which happened, if I may say, a financial crisis in my own life which happened. And at that point, I realized that if something like this can happen to me, who is a finance professional, who understands finance from the core of it, if a financial crisis can happen to me and how it can totally destabilize the family when something like that happens, then what about the millions of women across the world who depend on their counterparts or somebody else and do not take charge of their finances and continue to feel vulnerable and insecure because of a lack of financial understanding? And that's what began my journey to start Moola for Women, because I wanted to make finance simple, fun, accessible, and jargon free for women so that they can start taking charge of their finances and stop feeling intimidated by something which is, I really believe, a life skill.
Wonderful. No, I think it always happens from a personal story, and I think personal kind of challenge that you face, that you want to actually benefit others. And I think as women, that is something that comes very naturally. This nurturing quality where we feel that, if we went through it, others should not go through it as well, right?
So
So
true.
I think
So
that's lovely
true.
for you to start Moola for this whole reason. Now, so we have a few questions. Okay, so with decades of experience in finance, what are the biggest changes you've seen in how women engage with money?
Awesome question, because the landscape has definitely undergone a change in the last 30 years that I have seen and have been in this industry. So initially, more and as we grew up, we've seen that it's always been the fathers, the husbands taking care of the money, and the wives and the mothers being the nurturing ones, the caring ones, the ones who are taking care of the family and are taking care of the other responsibilities of the house. But the money decisions and the money management was always with the men. But as things are moving and as the world is changing, you can now see that now everyone realizes that it's a life skill. It's something which makes you feel more secure. Understanding finances and managing your own finances is a skill which women have started understanding the value of it. And because of that, I really see a shift in their own mindsets and thought processes to say that it's no longer something which is good to have, but a more of a need to have and a must have as we go along. And of course, there's a long way to go, but at least the dial is moving in the right direction, and that's super awesome.
Wonderful. So I think, there is a shift of traditional, I think, the way people look at money. And I think that is why women right now really need to manage it much better, right? Now, what financial habits do you think every woman should develop early in life?
Financial habits. I think the first thing that every woman should have is a belief that she can. The first and very important thing is a mindset shift from the fact that, oh, I don't need to manage my finances, there's somebody else who's taking care of my money, to the fact that I need to, and I want to, and I must take charge of my finances, and I have the ability to do that. And once that shift happens of that I can, then you're ready to embark on your journey to do all the right things to start managing your money. Obviously, you start small, you start things like you save your money, you plan your money, you budget your money, you have your goals, and many, many more things. But the first thing, if you ever ask me, will always be the overcoming of that resistance yourself, within yourself, that as a woman, it's not for me, it's got too much of maths, it's very difficult. So all these mindset issues need to be really done away with, and then you're ready to embark on your journey. And it's, believe you me, it's one of the most simple things to do. As finance people, we just make it harder for everyone because that's how we earn our bread and butter. But the fact is that it's pure and simple common sense, and it's really easy to start systematically managing and growing your money to secure yourself. So it's not about creation of wealth for the sake of wealth, right? But it's a creation of wealth to secure your freedom, to secure your life goals. And once you know your why, then your how will happen very, very automatically.
Wonderful. Okay, so a question has come from the audience, okay, and it's lovely to see some men also have joined the live session, okay. So my husband has actually asked, do women feel more compelled to spend for their kids than men in general?
That's a very interesting question, Abhi, right? If I get your name
Abhijit,
right,
yes, Abhijit.
Abhijit, right? So, Abhijit, lovely to have you here in this forum. And do women feel more compelled to spend? So, compelled is a word which I would not use for anyone, whether it's a man or a woman. I think it's pure joy spending, you yourself, I'm not sure whether you have kids, but as a father or a mother, I think it's always a joy to spend with for your kids, for your children. And I personally feel that there is no such differentiation or distinction about one feeling more compelled rather than the other.
Wonderful, yes. And I think, but from your experience, do women overthink in when they're spending the household, things like groceries, or they're more the savers, or you feel men are more the savers?
So again, it really depends on the control of money, who has it in the family, and the power dynamics that are there in the family. If women are working with a scarcity mindset, if they're working from a space of, or if they're managing the money, whatever that money is, whether it's from, the money that has been given by the husband to manage, to do the budgets of the house, or your own money, if you are coming from a space of scarcity, then you will always feel, whenever you're spending, you will feel the pressure. You will feel that, should I? Is it important? And you'll ask all the questions because you feel constrained around money. But when you feel abundant, when you feel that there is enough, when you've been given that freedom to use money for the money is just a medium, right? It's we who are putting our emotions behind that money. So it's really about whether you feel empowered around your money or whether you feel scarce around your money. And that is the distinction of whether you will spend more openly or you will feel constrained while even doing your grocery shopping and say, is it worth it? Do I go for something which is less expensive? Should I postpone it for it? Which are okay, which are all really good questions to ask. Okay, so I won't deny the fact that you should ask these questions to yourself, but it's the space within your internal dialogue from which it comes. If it comes from a scarcity dialogue, then it's not a good situation to be in. But if it comes from a position of being smart, intelligent, using your money wisely, then it's an absolutely good decision to make, that whether you really need to spend that money or not.
Okay. Now, do you feel that sometimes this mindset of scarcity or feeling empowered when you have money, is it because of a generation trauma or the way you've been brought up? So sometimes it feels that, if you were brought up in poverty, or if you were brought up, where you had very few resources, you had a lot of siblings that you had, the family was very large. So do you feel that that matters in the way that you look at money, the way you actually perceive it, the way you now currently manage it?
So again, Niharika, it's a beautiful question, and I generally, in my tribe, I answer this question very differently. And if I love to tell stories, so if you're okay, I'll tell a short story on this.
Yes.
Okay, so and it's an example which will probably give you an understanding of this question, whether it's the childhood trauma which determines how a person thinks about money. Okay, so here are two kids. Let's call them Paul and John. Okay, who are sitting at a dinner table with their parents, and the father is a smoker. Okay, and the mother doesn't like it. That, are you there with me? Can everybody hear me? Can you just give me a thumbs up if you can all hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. So the father is a smoker and the mom does not like it. And so they're bickering on the dinner table, and the mother is telling the father, you should not smoke and it's not good for you. And if you can leave smoking, both these boys, Paul and John, are listening to the parents bickering on the dinner table. Now, Paul loves to see Hollywood movies, and he loves to see people smoking cigar and all of those kind of things, where, pipes and cigars. And he actually wants to also copy his dad when he is smoking, and he is really lured by his dad being a smoker. Whereas John has seen his very close friend's father pass away because of smoking, because he got cancer. Now, two kids sitting on the same dinner table take very opposite things from that thing that the father is doing, right? One decides that he is going to be like his dad, and he's going to smoke, and this is the style with which he'll smoke, and all of those kind of things. And the other decides that he will never smoke because smoking kills. Now, it's the same thing about money. In a family, there could be different kids who take back different aspects when a conversation about money is being had in the family, or whatever their circumstances are. What is it that you resonate with? What are the values and beliefs that you have will superimpose on top of what you see in the environment? So for some people, yes, you're right. I have seen a lot of women who have this mindset of scarcity because of a childhood trauma. They feel that, money is scarce. Even if they're earning well, they have a hoarding, they want to hoard money. They want to not spend their money because they're insecure around their money, and they find it scarce despite the fact that it's available in abundance for them. And then there are women who have been through a similar experience in life, but it has taught them a very different thing. They say, we don't want to have a limiting mindset. We've lived all our life as a kid with this limiting mindset. And today we feel liberated. We feel free, and we feel that we have the ability to spend. And why not if we can? So it's really not just your trauma, but many other factors which are environmentally there, and what you as a person have your own values and beliefs and what you resonate with, which will determine how you view money.
Wonderful. So this is so interesting because, so we have a 6-year-old daughter, right? Now, the whole, when we are also trying to teach, like, how to save and how to spend, say we go to a shop. Naturally, it comes, is this expensive? Is this not expensive? And should we say that to a child, right? That we can't afford it, or it's too expensive? Do we really need it or want it, right? So when we're having this conversation in our mind, also we are thinking that, do we buy something because we need it, because we want it? And also, what percentage of our salary every month should we spend for us to actually utilize the money that we're earning? Because later on that money will not grow, right, to that rate. So isn't it better? So I don't know, somewhere I read that 20% of whatever you're earning, you should spend. Is that a correct fact?
So I think you've touched upon a few things. I'd like to first talk about your 6-year-old child, and when you have said that, should I say, talk to my kid that, oh, it's expensive, can we afford it, do we need it, do we want it? I think it's very, very important as parents not to build a scarcity mindset and talk such things around money to your kids that, oh, we can't afford it, it's very expensive. The better conversation would be that, is it, why do we need it? Is it needed right now? Is it something which we want? Do you think it's important to buy it right now? What is your reason? So understand and have a conversation around it. And then if it is important, then, it's like a dialogue. When you have a dialogue with your kids, they start understanding a rationale, right? That it comes out of logic, that you have taken certain decisions not out of a feeling of scarcity, but out of a logic and a rationale, because right now there's something more important which needs that money, and maybe, we can postpone this for a later date. You're not showing the scarcity. You're not showing that, oh, I can't afford it. Of course I can afford it, but money has alternate uses. And right now, the use of money is better in this way rather than in this way. So I think it's very important to set the right context for your kids. That's
Wonderful.
As far as your kids is concerned. The second is how much to spend and how much to save.
Yes.
I always have a very interesting mantra, which I call a Moola mantra. It's called SFSL, and maybe everyone can just write that down. SFSL. Save first, spend later. Because if you don't save first, you will never save. Because money has a way of getting spent. Often you'll hear people talk about things like, oh, I don't know where my money goes. I'm not a spender, but I don't know where my money goes, right? Because money has a way of getting spent in any case. So the moment you get your salary, save and keep aside at least 20% of whatever money you get aside, and don't touch it. Now, of course, try and invest it, and we can talk about that and have a different discussion. But do not touch 20% of your income. The moment you get it, set it aside first. And then within the 80% that you have, split it between your needs and your wants. And whatever are your needs obviously come first. So you should not be spending on your shopping or doing something at the cost of not taking care of your needs, your kids' education, your rent, your grocery, your utilities, right? So some of these things are non-negotiables. You need to have enough money to take care of your non-negotiables, and then allocate some money towards of course, your discretionary spending towards things which you enjoy spending for, or for your future goals. So all of those things, the best way to budget your money, and a very simple rule, is the 50-30-20 rule. So 20% is what you save, 50% is for your needs, and 30% is for your wants. In that way, you will allocate your money sufficiently to even enjoy your money, to save for your future goals, and to see that your needs are taken care of.
Wonderful. I love how you have actually demarcated needs and wants. And we all know that you have to first do your savings, remove certain amount, but this actually creating this distinction in our mind will really help us also organize the way we are managing our finances. Excellent point. Thank you, Meeta. Another question is, many women still hesitate to take charges of their finances. What are the psychological or societal barriers holding them back?
I think I mentioned it a little while back that it's actually the way we've been all brought up. We've seen our mothers, we've seen our grandmothers, we've seen people around us, and women are very busy. So I mean, I can't take that away from them, that women are really busy doing a lot of things. Kids take a lot of their time. They're also working, right? They're taking care of the home, they're taking care of elders, they're taking care of many other because of all women have, they probably take a choice of not taking charge of their finances. So it's like a voluntary step back, right? They step back from that responsibility because they feel that they have enough on their plate. The other thing is that in a few families, money is associated with power, and they do not want to change or disturb the power dynamics of their home. Mm-hmm. And the moment you start influencing money decisions, or start taking those decisions, there can be discomfort in some families, which I've seen, which should not happen, but it is again a thing which has been it's a social conditioning which has been happening for a very long time, that this is not your field. Women don't need to talk about money. Women should not talk about money. It's not associated. Money is not associated with women. And because of all these baggages which women probably have carried from a very long time, and women are the nurturing ones, women are the ones who will take care of the kids, the family, and all of these things make women take a step back and give it to their counterparts or their fathers to manage their money. And I always say that there was this blog which somebody had written, where I had actually contributed, the name of that blog was "Tell Me Where to Sign." And as women, what do? We literally land up getting somebody to give us, whether it's your father or your husband, saying that, okay, this is what you need to do, just sign here. And often you won't even read that document, and you'll just sign and then continue to feel insecure and fearful because you don't know where your money is going, or you don't know you don't have access to your finances because of various reasons. Like I said, it could be your own your own fears, or your own thought that you don't have the time, or it could be a thing of the way your family dynamics are, that you can't talk about money. It's not taken very well. So for various reasons, it could happen that women kind of shy away from taking those decisions.
So maybe I'll take a little bit on the psychological part. I feel that also it's the way women perceive themselves, right? Yes. So if a woman takes themselves as being just someone who is a supportive function, then the woman does not take control of things which seem to be important decisions.
Very well said.
A woman, yes, and if a woman believes that she is the person who is in control, or who is the person who's actually in charge of the family's well-being, health, finances, the growth, the women do take charge. That's my
Lovely.
little bit.
I love that. I love that, Niharika. You are so, so right. It's about the ownership, right? It's about the ownership at the end of it to say that, am I in charge of the well-being of my family or the well-being of my house? And yes, absolutely, that makes a difference. I agree with that totally.
Wonderful. No, these are such interesting decisions and discussions to have. And I think that's why. So I think there was obviously all those things happening that should we cancel Women's Day. But I always feel that, these days just remind us that these are important initiatives and discussions to continue versus just a day for just focusing on it.
100%. If I would just, probably say that just like we celebrate birthdays, just like we celebrate anniversaries, there's no harm in celebrating women, right? And I think recognizing them for what they've done, and also taking this as an opportunity to do something more for them or for ourselves as women, to say that how do we empower ourselves and take ourselves to the next level from here. So I think
Exactly.
that was wonderful.
What's the most common financial mistakes women make, and how can they avoid it?
Mistake. I think the biggest mistake that women make is that they think that it's something which they don't need to take care of. They'll be taken care of by the men in their family. They'll be taken care of by their husbands. They'll be taken care of by their sons. They'll be taken care of by their fathers. And I think that mistake is the biggest when it comes to handling your money. And of course, I mean, in terms of, that's like a mindset issue. Okay, and in terms of practical, in terms of what is the mistake which they do, is they keep money in their piggy banks. Even if they're saving, they do not think, they're risk averse. And I think one major reason which I can say for being risk averse is lack of knowledge. And because you don't have knowledge, you feel that you will lose your money because you don't know how to invest your money, you don't know where to put your money, you're not confident about giving your money to other people to manage it for you. And because of that, you don't let your money work for you. Even if you have money, and I see so many women who have a lot of money, I mean, literally thousands and lakhs of rupees or dirhams or dollars or whatever it is, sitting in their bank account, in their savings account or in their current account, and not earning anything or not making it work for them, that money, because of a lack of understanding of the avenues of where to invest or how to invest.
Yes. No, I think as you mentioned, lack of knowledge. I always believe knowledge is power. Ignorance is what causes your death of mind, death of just doing things out of ignorance is the worst thing you could do.
So
Okay.
true,
So
so
it's
true.
very important to gather, but also the right knowledge. A lot of times, knowledge is taken from sources which are absolutely incorrect in their information. So it's very important. So, would you like to suggest a couple of sources where women could read a little bit more about, say, finance to educate themselves in the correct manner? Because I think that would really be helpful for us. There's so much news out there. So I think where is the starting point? Where should I start?
So I think again that's a very, very pertinent question, if I may say so. And the reason for that is that there is so much information available on social media, right? There's so many influencers, there's so many blogs, there's so many websites, there's so much information. And it's like not only uh, an amount of information is large, but also the nuances of how they talk about money is different, right? And one will talk about it in the form of something like let me explain the mathematical idea of it. Somebody will give the psychological aspect of it, somebody will give you a financial aspect of it. So what to choose, who to listen to. And if you've seen, SEBI has recently come upon a lot of influencers to say that, to stop them from giving advice, because just to increase their followership, they kind of give wrong advice, or advice which is probably correct for them, but may not be correct for somebody else, right? And that's why to have a reliable source to start understanding things in the right perspective is the key to getting the right knowledge. And I think that's what we are doing at Moola for Women. So I personally feel that, you know, you can try learning from all these influencers and all these blogs and all these websites or these YouTube channels, but it will confuse you more than it will, you know, add value to you. Because, I mean, let me give you a very small example. Everybody says, oh, you must do SIPs. Okay, now a lot of people would think SIP is an investment. Do you think SIP is an investment?
I think so.
Okay. So what is the full form of SIP? Would you be aware of it?
No, I think it's better if you say it. Yeah.
So SIP is a systematic investment plan. Okay. It's a form of investment. It means it's like I will systematically put 20 rupees aside out of every 100 rupees on the 5th of every month.
Mm.
This is what a SIP is. Now, it is not in anything telling you that where should you put your SIP.
Yeah.
Now, do you know that within India there are 2,500 mutual funds?
Oh wow.
So when people say invest in a mutual fund, I've invested in a mutual fund. Which mutual fund? Do you know the difference between these 2,500 mutual funds? So if somebody doesn't open these threads for you in a very systematic and a simple manner, it will raise more questions in your mind than solve them.
Yeah. So you think these financial planners are helpful, like to take their advice? Would they take your benefit, or would they just be selling the best investment plan for, where they can get the best sales return or something?
So I think, trust is a very, very important factor. When you choose your financial planner, you have to choose that financial planner because you believe in their values and that they are going to help you grow your money rather than think of their own benefits. And in today's world, there are many, many, many financial planners who do not think of the client, right? Because they have their own journey, they have their own growth, they have their own targets, because of which they land up giving wrong advice to people who are vulnerable to that advice. Now, if somebody comes to me giving a wrong advice, I will not take that advice because I understand what he's going to or she's going to tell me, right? And where is she coming from? And I will have those 10 extra questions to ask her before understanding what her reason is for suggesting that plan to me. But for a person who's ignorant, and you always remember, whenever you're selling, you always sell the good things. In fact, I was just having this conversation yesterday with a person, and this person was asking me that question about risks, and I said that you're so right. Whenever any person will come and sell a plan to you or any product to you, they'll only tell you the good parts of it. They'll not share with you the risks or the downsides, or what if in the worst case scenario, what will happen to my money, right? And the important thing, what knowledge does to you is it gives you the right framework and the ability to ask the right questions to understand that what is the worst case scenario that will happen. And when you know your worst case scenario, you're in a better position to understand whether that financial planner is telling you things to your benefit or for his or her benefit, right?
And so this makes me really think of an example. Okay, sorry I cut you. I know you.
No, please.
Okay, so I always say that, so I had a cook. Okay, so, she thought, of course, she's like, okay, I had just got married. She thought I didn't know cooking. I didn't know how to make tea. So she started, obviously showing her bossiness in the kitchen, right? She was like, okay, this madam doesn't know anything. Let me just show her. She started obviously using a little bit extra of this, a little bit extra of that, and with the thing that I didn't know how to make a tea. She was like, whatever tea I would give them, they would enjoy it
Yes.
without anything.
Yes.
But the day I made her tea and I showed her how to make it, the way she started trusting and respecting me, because I had that knowledge, that extra knowledge, she stopped fluffing around. Right. So I always tell people, like, even like with a financial planner, that's exactly what you need to do. Okay. You read about information or investment plans that they are going to sell you from before. So you are already in your mind, you have some pros and benefits, and you have questions to ask them. So then it becomes a more constructive kind of financial planning, because it's organizing your money. You need to think a little bit more into it instead of having a more laid back approach. And then they know that they cannot fluff around.
No, absolutely. I think you're so right. I always tell people that, you know, what finance is doing, I mean, what I am doing at Moolah for Women is really teaching you how to cook rather than, you know, you taking something which is already cooked, right? Because even if you know how to cook, doesn't mean that you need to cook. You can still use the services of a cook to cook, but that cook will, one, like you said, respect you, and two, cannot bluff you, because you know how to cook and you can guide that cook onto what you want. What is it that benefits me? Like, I like to eat healthy food, I like to eat gluten-free food, I like to eat vegetables. Now you are in that frame where you can tell people exactly what you want to eat, rather than they're giving you whatever and you have no option and you eat whatever has been given and cooked for you, right?
Wonderful. So we have a comment, okay, from one of our viewers. So absolutely well said. Doing your homework will make the conversation so much more beneficial.
Absolutely, Nimita.
Wonderful. Okay, so if you could give, we're at the end of our session. So if you could give one piece of financial advice to every woman watching today, what would it be?
So, ladies, I'd like to say, and men, both, for everyone, I'd like to say that managing your money is a life skill. It's like learning how to cook food, learning how to do swimming, driving, all of these things. These are life skills, and learning how to manage your money is a life skill, and it's extremely simple. It's just made out to be looking much harder than it is, but it is really simple. So please change your mindset from saying that I can't to I can, and begin your journey to your own financial freedom.
Wonderful. And there were two, I think, rules or laws you had mentioned. If you could just go back to that SFSL.
So yes, one is the SFSL, save first, spend later. Save at least 20% of your income, or whatever, I call it pinching your money. Literally. So what you do is, even if you're getting money from your household budget, from your husband, father, whoever, 20% of it, pinch it out and keep it aside before you spend. And the second is the 50-30-20 rule, which means 20% you save, at least 20%. If you can save more, no problem, but at least 20% of all you earn, just start saving first, and then 50% towards your needs and 30% towards your wants.
Wonderful. So that brings us to the end of this powerful and insightful conversation. A huge thank you to Meeta Gupta for sharing her knowledge and shedding light on the importance of financial independence for women. Your journey with Moolah for Women is truly inspiring, and we appreciate the impact you're making. Thank you everyone who joined us today. Let's continue to break barriers and take charge of our growth, both financially and personally. So this Women's Day, let's think for the future and let's break barriers. 100%. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, lovely audience, and thank you, Niharika, for this opportunity, and a happy Women's Day to all of you lovely ladies.
Happy Women's Day. Thank you for your time, Meeta. Bye-bye.